Welcome, everyone, to another edition of Birminology on Lettermen Row. Today's a little different, special edition of the show. We have Mark Pantoni, Ohio State's Director of Player Personnel, sort of the godfather of player personnel around the country. And I don't know, Mark, do you realize or do you sort of view yourself in that role around the country as a guy that sort of spearheaded this new movement and the way that college football recruiting is done?
Honestly, it just makes me feel old. No, but then I look around and I've been blessed to help mentor a bunch of guys in both college and NFL now. So it does make me feel like I've been doing it a long time now, and I love to give back, help mentor young guys, and help them accomplish their goals too, like I did.
In the last few years, you've seen a lot of things change since you started this way back in 2007, I think, at Florida.
Thanks, yeah.
What have you seen as far as the changes to the recruiting calendar and how they've impacted recruits, their families, and how they've affected your coaches and you and your families? Like, what do you think generally has been the best change, and what change do you think has been the most negative for players?
Well, it's changed significantly. Really with the advent of social media, recruiting has become early and earlier. The addition of Huddle, where film is now always available. Back when I started, it was mailing out VHS tapes and DVDs and hoping that a high school coach will return it with film. And so just the technology, the social media, everything is in real time. So when prospects post updates, when interviews come out on recruiting sites, it's just a constant flow of information. So you always have to be up to date on everything going on. And then just with the recruiting calendar now with spring and summer official visits, everything's moved so far up, that we're forced to make decisions earlier. There's no more watching senior film, or very little of it, because most classes are almost full by then. So you just have to be efficient with your time and just make great staff decisions on guys that are future Buckeyes. One
thing that I'm regularly asked about recruiting is how much guys like you pay attention to rankings, to interviews. And you just brought it up, so I want to ask, but is there like a dedicated dude in your office who sits there and watches and reads? I mean, how do you guys stay abreast of all that stuff? Because there is so much happening. If one player goes on a visit to a school and then there's 5 different places writing about that visit, like, how are you guys paying attention to that, and how much weight is given to that sort of circumstance?
So just with the interviews and social media, people always joke that I'm constantly staring at my phone as I walk through the hallways, and because that's what I'm looking at. I'm constantly scrolling through Twitter. I'm scrolling through recruiting websites just to gather information and make sure that we're up to date. Who's offered who? If a school we compete against just offered a kid and we don't know about it, we better start that evaluation quickly and be on it. As far as the rankings, we pay very little attention to it. If anything, we just use them as a starting point to help us do our own evaluations, but there's never any time we're like, oh, we're going to take this kid over this kid because he's a 4-star versus a 3-star. We go purely by our evaluations, and that's not just film. It's getting them on campus, getting to know them. Do they fit our culture? What are their academics like? Those type of things aren't figured in star rating or position ranking, so that also plays a huge part in how we select guys.
I want to talk about something that Buckeye fans ask about a lot, which is Friday Night Lights, and why this summer it was decided to go away from that sort of camp setup and that open to the public, opportunity for fans and stuff. You and I talked about it, and it was about the fact that a lot of kids aren't camping anymore. But what do you see happening in the future with that, and why did you guys make that decision ultimately this summer to go away from it? Because I think some people will link it to Ryan Day and his first year, and he doesn't want to do it. But what ultimately went into that decision?
Well, every year we look and see, is this something that's beneficial for us? And just looking at the last couple of years, the talent had gone way down for that event. And, we always have our June camps, and we get 800 to 900 kids at those camps. So what was happening is we'd make a big push to get 2021s or the upcoming juniors to those camps to get that peer evaluation. And then we found out it was getting really hard to get them back a second time, or to get kids to come back in July, because they were done camping. They had just finished a whole whirlwind of visits, with the opening going on and Rivals five-star challenge. Right. And we just weren't getting the the quality of talent we were hoping for. So in our mind, our focus in the June camps just to get all the top 2021s there. Let's get the initial evaluation that we need, which we were very good at doing. Our coaching staff did a great job. So then it became, okay, what group of kids are actually going to come back in July and want to work out for us? And we figured it just wasn't going to be worth, of what we were going to get. So we decided in June just to do more of a barbecue setting, more laid back, and to get some more top guys for that type of event where kids would come on campus for. And we felt like it went really well. We had a small group, which is ideal for a camp setting. And we probably build off that next year and see how it goes.
Now, the recruiting dead period that we're in right now, that ends in a week. And
Correct.
Is there do you guys have any plan for that final weekend before all the camps, college camps and high school camps begin? Or is it just a matter of, hey, if somebody wants to come visit, come visit?
Yeah, we're just more of an open invitation if have kids come visit. But really, once we get back from our break here, really our main focus is getting ready for training camp. And our coaches have been away from our players now for a couple of weeks. More on and off interaction, and we really need to get ready for the season, get our coaches around our players, and that's most important for this time of the year right now, is to make sure our players are ready to go for training camp.
Your job is different, obviously, than any of the assistant coaches. You're doing a lot more stuff away from the field, but the assistant coaches and the way that you're familiar with them and the trust you have in them impacts how you do your job. Have you ever had an off season where you were as personally affected, I guess, by all the transition with 5 new assistants, a new head coach? How did all that impact your job in the last 6 months?
Yeah, it's hard, especially in the month of January, December, January, and a lot of changes are taking place, and things are hectic with, signing they just had happened or coming up for the second one of February. So the biggest part is just getting them acclimated on how we do things, what the operational structure is, getting them acclimated to go on the road recruiting and not have been at Ohio State and not know much about Ohio State, and then you have to go into kids' homes and sell Ohio State. So what can we do to educate them and make them, functional to, not just sell who they are, but really the great brand of Ohio State, which really sells itself too. Is there
like an orientation process? You sit everyone down and you say, listen, here's what we do. I mean, is there a timeline for when you're allowed to say the word Michigan, like after you start, like before you can no longer say it? I mean,
guys learn real quick before they step in the door, don't say that word. So
let me ask you this. I mean, I know a lot of people understand your importance to the Ohio State program. A lot of people understand how close you have always been with Urban Meyer. Why did you, and I'm going to assume you had opportunities to go elsewhere if you wanted them. What was it about Coach Day and the transition into his staff that made you decide this is actually where I want to be?
Well, Coach Day is a great person, great husband, great father, and we all kind of know who had been with him these last 2 years that the transition would go pretty seamless with him, and we got my idea of that from the training camp last year. All of August, he was in charge of the team in the first 3 games. So, we were used to what his coaching style would be, and obviously, being that great at that opportunity to stay with him was an easy decision. My family loves being in Columbus. We've got a great group of players and enjoy going to work every day. So it was just a very seamless transition with Coach Day, and we're all glad the infrastructure could stay the same.
When you talk about the players, and this is something that I think you've been probably more involved with than anybody else, if the outsider looking in looks at those Florida rosters from 2008, 2009, 2010, and people will have questions about, what about the quality of the kid? Was it part of your personal, growth or personal decision to make sure moving forward that the kids that you guys are recruiting are different than they used to be? Because from my perspective, from a media perspective, we see such an incredible difference between the kids in that locker room now as even opposed to 5 years ago. I mean, it seems like it's constantly evolving and constantly getting better. Is that how high on the list is that for you?
Extremely high. I just think when you're in the process of building a team, I think just the character in that locker room, and the leadership that you're going to build from strong families, kids who care about academics, kids that are going to want to work hard for a team goal rather than personal goals. I think that's part of the reason we've had great success here. But we pay a huge amount of attention to. We don't want to bring in guys that we're going to have to chase around to go to school. We're not going to bring in guys who are going to be more caring about they're just getting to the NFL rather than team goals. So as we put together a class, that's a huge focus on us and making sure we're putting the right pieces together.
Does it drive you crazy when you still, obviously you're reading everything, does it drive you nuts when you read fans or other media members make the suggestion that you don't play school at Ohio State? Like, does that not drive you up a wall? Because I know from talking to you guys over the last few years how much of a focus you've made that, but how hard is it to break that, that preconceived notion of people?
Yeah, it's almost like having so many guys drafted in the NFL is like we've done a bad job, because like that schools just want to claim that we're a football factory, and we have to apologize that we've done a great job evaluating and putting, a lot of guys in the NFL who are now accomplishing their goals and dreams, setting their family for life. But when you look at the big picture of what Ohio State is, how hard it is to get into school here with the average ACT of being a 29, and really you can't find another program in the country that spent more time doing the Real Life Wednesday stuff and life after football than Coach Meyer had done when he was here. You're not going to find that anywhere else. And so it is almost laughable when schools, we hear the word football factory all the time, but that's just a product of, evaluating the right guys and them having success and being developed here.
Let's say you were the NCAA rule maker. What is one rule that you would implement and to help make this recruiting world easier to navigate for kids and their families and for you? What's one thing that you would change?
The one thing that I've kind of been talking about right now to see at least some feedback is in sports such as basketball, soccer, those coaches can go to AU tournaments, they can go to showcase events where they're seeing great competition, playing great competition. So to me, why college coaches can't go to an event such as the Open and go to an event, such as the Rivals 5-Star Challenge, Army game, Under Armour games, I think those are optimal times for college coaches to be able to go, not being allowed to talk to the kids and families, but at least to go watch practices,
right,
and get great evaluations to where you're seeing great competition on great competition, and really also seeing how kids, function under that environment with a lot of stress and pressure and college coaches there. So to me, that's one role that I think that should be discussed.
Are there any recent changes that had been made that you would roll back if you were in that position?
There's a bunch. I'm trying to think of one specifically. There's without naming one, but there are rules all the time that get passed, and it's like, okay, not one person in this room agrees with it. How does this happen? And so there does need to be more focus on having, I think, coaches or personnel people on these committees, who live this life, and rather than sometimes there's presidents of small schools that are helping pass legislation that,
right,
okay, who actually wanted these rules to change.
Let me finish it up here with two softball type questions. What recruit in your life at Ohio State, so up until the 2019 class, did you think you had no chance to sign that you ended up somehow pulling it off?
I think the one is definitely J.K. Dobbins, and Tony still jokes about all the time with me of like, okay, here's a kid who lives right down the street from Austin, Texas, and he basically committed here without ever taking a visit. And then when Tom got there, it's like, okay, here we go. All the new, hurrah of the new program, new coach. This is going to be a hard one. But that would be the one just off the top of my mind. I was like, okay, we have no chance of getting this kid, but Tony definitely pulled through.
And on the flip side, is there one that hurt the most or that changed the way you have handled recruiting the most? You don't have to name a name if you don't want to put anybody on blast, but I think most people will leap to assumptions one way or another. But is there one that you're like, how the heck did that happen?
No, there's not just one. I mean, it happens, and there's multiple reasons why they happen. But obviously, you just wish the kid and their family well, and you always root for their success wherever they go. Do
you take it personally when someone that you've built a relationship with for 2 years goes elsewhere? Is that a personal blow, or is it a on to the next one? And I know that the machismo side of you will say on to the next one, but that has to hurt, right?
No, when I was younger and just starting out, it definitely was personal to me, and it took me at least a day or two to get over. It's almost like losing a game,
Right.
in my world. And now when I've gotten older, it's like I get it more, and I understand why kids would do stuff. And there's so much pressure coming from all different angles, even with social media now, that you just move on to the next one and hope to find another quality person and player. Last
thing, for fans on social media, do they hurt or help your recruiting efforts more often?
I was just asked this, by someone else too, and I think a lot of times, like I said, the pressure on these kids already is so much that sometimes it's just another extra layer that fans can put on these kids. And I know some have very well intentions, but if a kid for some reason upsets a fan base, then it can be almost cancerous.
Right.
And you never want to see a young kid have to deal with that sort of stuff who's maybe not mature enough to handle it. And it's not good when the families bring it to our attention as well. The fans, or these fans, not just not talking
right.
specifically anybody, but these fans were really hard on my kid, and that definitely plays an impact on their decisions sometimes.
Well, look, Mark, we appreciate you being on the show. This episode of Birminology on Lettermen Row. I'm Berm. That is Mark Pantoni, Ohio State's Director of Player Personnel. Thank you for joining us, and good luck this season.
Thanks, Jeremy.